Hello, my name is Kenya Montes, and today I will be talking about community advocacy for Latina teen pregnancy. So, this is an overview of equity issues. Um, the data with Latina teens we found is that Latina teens are most impacted by teen pregnancy, and we found that with data from the California Department of Public Health. And it shows that there's a higher rate of teen pregnancy compared to other ethnicities, such as Asian and white. Many are first generation English learners or from mixed status families. And there's also cultural stigma and expectations, limited reproductive health education, and caregiving responsibilities. So, what that means is that they struggle to get access to reproductive health education, and they also have other caregiving responsibilities. And it can be taking care of their younger siblings, taking care of grandparents. Sometimes they live in a multiple household, and having teen pregnancy occur, it can be really hard on them. So, there's a lot of those expectations placed on them, and then not having that access to um, health education can really be difficult to manage all of that. Some systemic factors are lack of clear school policies for pregnant and parenting students. Most of the time, schools don't really have those policies in place, so it's kind of like a when it happens, and they kind of go from there. So it can be not as clear, and teachers may not know that there's a plan in place, or if there is no plan in place. So it can be a little confusing. So schools aren't really prepared for things like this. Um, there's also rigid attendance rules and limited academic accommodations. So you miss school kind of thing. So um, the attendance rules can be really rigid, and there may not be no accommodations available. And it's important to look at that and understand, like, hey, like, this is a student that is pregnant, and there should be accommodations to help them be successful in school. There's also implicit bias and low expectations from educators, and yeah, that can be very judgmental on them for being a teen mom. And staff members may express those biases to them, and then that can cause them to feel like they are ashamed, and then they can't graduate. So that is something that can happen, and it's just really important to know and be aware that implicit bias happens among this group. There's also community barriers. So, like I mentioned, the other side, limited health care. There's also childcare and language access services. So, if the primary language is Spanish, they may have a difficult time understanding what's happening and like what resources are available and where they can get childcare. So, there's a lot of issues that can pile up on them, and it can be difficult to navigate that if they are unaware of what is out there in reach for them to get the support they need. And this is kind of an overview of like how this impacts Latina adolescents. So they may feel stressed, overwhelmed, or isolated for being pregnant. They might struggle with confidence or feel judged at school and at home. Balancing school pregnancy and parenting impacts the emotional well being, so it really takes a toll on them. Managing being a teenager on top of being pregnant, and then, those um, expectations of now that they will be a mom or a new transition for them and what that would look like. And then the culture expectations, such as Marianismo, which is a model of female submissiveness and self sacrifice. Um, I've seen this in my own family, how, like, if I've had people in my family that were pregnant at a young age, like, it's very common to self sacrifice, and, your needs don't matter anymore. What matters is the child, and it can be really, disheartening if, that student wants to pursue a career and all that. So it's very common in a Latino culture to do that, and can place a lot of high expectations on a Latina teen trying to figure it all out. And then missing school due to appointments. So if they have to get checkups, prenatal checkups, and all that, so that can affect um, graduating. They miss a lot of class because they have to go to these appointments, which falls into falling behind in class, right? If you're not in school, you fall behind. Then that adds into a higher chance of dropping out. It's kind of like a domino effect with that, and then it'd be harder to graduate and then go and pursue higher education. So, once one thing happens, it kind of like continues, and it can be a lot, which results in them feeling overwhelmed and isolated from their peers that do not understand what they're going through, and the shame they may feel by going to school and being pregnant and also coming home, and it can be a lot of stress, emotional stress. So it's important to be aware that this happens among this population. And now I'm going to jump over to what we can do, which is the Equity and Impact Plan. So this is a visual handout for community members, and it's about ensuring pregnant and parenting Latina teens receive culturally responsive support so they can stay engaged in school, access those available resources, and achieve long-term academic success. So, the purpose is to offer that support, be aware of those cultural stigmas, um, limited, health education they may not be aware of, may not know. And, there can be a high risk of absenteeism, disengagement, and essentially dropping out of school, which we do not want that to happen, right? We need to have those supports in place. And what we can do in a school setting is have those supports, such as group counseling, individual check ins with them, seeing how they're doing, how they feel, providing them basically an outlet where they can talk, especially with counselors, about what's going on. And we would be the most knowledgeable on how to best support them, right? By listening to them, acknowledging them, and also providing translation services as well. And then the key barriers, um, like I mentioned in the beginning, school policies, there's not much in place, which schools should have a plan in place for when this does happen. And then they may have limited access to reproductive mental health services. And there's a language barrier for a lot of students and their families. Parents may not know how to express that they're struggling with this new transition. So being aware that that happens and having those, translators on site would be beneficial. There's also the implicit bias, and then, having others say that they have low academic expectations of them. So just being aware of that and knowing that, like, that is not the case, that they can pursue, higher education, they can graduate, they can do what they need to do. And then community conditions, poverty plays a big factor with it. They have any housing instability, they're currently dealing with, and then access to childcare if it's available, figuring out like what is available for them. And most of the time they may not be aware of it, so that can be a really big barrier for them. Some community partnerships we would have would be collaborating with local healthcare providers. They would provide that health education piece, and they can also offer prenatal, postnatal care. That can be with childcare agencies, providing WIC, signing up for that. Mental health services would be a key part to it as well. Taking care of themselves emotionally is very important because it is a big transition for them. And then, having that family outreach if they're still in like high school, just being aware that like there can be outreach available, checking in on the family, seeing if they need anything else. This was my part of the presentation. Thank you very much.